Welcome to the Belgian Grand Prix review. Now, we do have a new member who might interrupt us from time to time, but I think we can forgive him. This is Pumpernickel. This is a food name-based household. He's just a little guy, but he's going to be interrupting us a lot because he's just a little kitten who likes to attack my mouse on the screen, as well as walk wherever I can pet him. Yes, the 2025 Belgian Grand Prix started late. A band of rain hit the track shortly before the start time of 3 p.m. local, and they delayed the race for an hour and 20 minutes. There were then 4 laps behind the safety car and then a rolling start. And I get it, the memes and some of the commentary is funny, but the outrage feels a little tiring. I also feel like certain creators and media outlets are doubling down on this discussion and outraging people on purpose to get clicks and views, and the algorithm is pushing it for engagement because it sees people arguing, and it's just so incredibly frustrating. As most of the problem with Formula One, this is a little bit of a nuanced discussion in my opinion. Spa is not your average racetrack. It's quoted as a high-speed roller coaster carved into a forest. There's blind corners, elevation changes, speed, the longest track on the calendar. It's definitely a driver's favorite circuit and a driver's circuit. You can't hide bad talent here at Spa, or a bad car. This track demands respect. And people commenting, overall critics conflate multiple issues at once. There's wet tire performance, the difficulty of rain racing at this track, and the overall FIA safety ethos. It's a gray area. Multiple things can be true and wrong at once. There's a lot of good discussion happening which agreed that we have a wet tire problem. It is a very rare sight to see full wets in action during a Formula One race. And the main reason for that is visibility. At racing speeds, one of Pirelli's blue wet tires can displace up to 85 liters of water a second. So the amount of water being displaced by 4 tires in the 4 corners of an F1 car adds up to a lot of spray. So the kind of circumstances that play into the wet tires usage usually calls for a red flag. This is also multiplied by the modern ground effect cars. And the key issue is the tire itself, in addition to the spray that it causes. Max Verstappen says he'd rather use intermediates even if a situation deems it wet because the performance is absolutely ass. Pardon my French. And there's more issues in that as well. Did you know the wet tires actually were susceptible to overheating? According to motorsport.com, when they talked to Pirelli, they said they made some changes for 2025, changing the tread pattern, and there'll be an overhaul for 2026. Then the third reoccurring problem in this wet tire situation is testing. Motorsport.com claims that teams and drivers often complain about the full wets, but Pirelli insists that developing them is inherently difficult under the current limitations. They do bring them to testing in case it does rain and they're able to change the program of testing and test out the wets. But there's no controlled environment and you don't have sprinklers at racetracks that you can just turn on to test these wets. So even in that alone is even more nuanced in the current argument about this race delay because yeah, the wet tires create terrible visibility as well as the ground effect cars. In addition to everything else going on with the wet tire, you'd rather just not use it, so teams would risk intermediates when a situation doesn't call for intermediates, and that inherently also isn't safe. And that leads me to point number 2, right? Racing in Spa in general, I mean, we can even go further than that, right? Racing in general is inherently dangerous, and you try to make it safer every year. Racing in the rain is even more dangerous. Racing at tracks like Spa is even more dangerous. We just keep double-clicking into this safety. You could argue they're being overly cautious, but after the discussions in Silverstone, the FIA is just trying to give the driver and Formula One management what they want. Leclerc even said it outright this weekend. You shouldn't forget what happened here in the past. People have been quoting that Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso have been saying they could have raced much earlier. They're also really good at racing in the wet, and their setups were made for such. Of course they wanted to race in the wet. But then you have drivers as Ocon saying, I still can't see, even though they're doing their safety car laps. George Russell saying it's slowly improving in terms of visibility, but still a bit difficult. Oscar Piastri saying the visibility is quite a lot better than before through Eau Rouge, but after Eau Rouge, it's still quite bad. So though you're cherry picking the 3 drivers who of course are having something to say because they would benefit from racing in the wet, we also need to look at the drivers who disagree with them, which includes Ocon, Oscar Piastri, George Russell, Lando Norris. I don't want to see any of this bullshit that FIA was doing this for McLaren. Stop. If you're about to type that, get away from here. This is not that kind of YouTube channel. I feel like we're not reacting to the delay. We're reacting with a ton of bias baked in. Could we have raced a little bit faster behind the safety car? Sure, but I really ultimately don't think it's that big of a deal. The rolling start, yes, was confusing. And I think that brings up my next point, the transparency behind FIA decisions. I also don't know if they were being overly cautious. There's no document stating what they did, why they did. I went on the FIA website. I have no freaking idea. If they went through their reasoning, would that help maybe calm people down? I have no idea, but we also have no idea what the decision they did. We don't know what information they had. We don't know what they saw on the track that we didn't see. We don't know what the folks drawing the track said. I don't know what every single driver and every single team said. There's so much that we are missing that we're just filling in with our own biases. Let's break it down. Hindsight bias, right? They could have raced at 3 p.m. Nothing happened. Nothing happened because they didn't race at 3 p.m. That's like saying you didn't get in a car accident, so you don't have to wear a seatbelt. Outcome bias. Judging the FIA's decisions based on how it turned out, not what they knew at the time. We actually don't know, which is another transparency issue, right? Negativity bias. Nobody logs on to praise a race delay that might have prevented a disaster. Log on because you're annoyed, you're bored, you don't understand the decision behind what happened. That's not objective, that's just dopamine. There's also present bias. You wanted a race now, not later. You wanted a race when it was scheduled. They don't owe us an entertaining race. They're here to run a race safely. Availability heuristic. Senna raced in the wet. You're only remembering the highlight reels. Nostalgia. You're not remembering the countless wet races that didn't go well. Confirmation bias, and let's be honest, if you hated the FIA, this was your moment. You didn't need facts, you just wanted to use the delay to yell about it. This proves that they were protecting McLaren. No, it just proves that you've been waiting to say that all year. We also had a full 44-lap race. What if it didn't rain? We would have had the same race. And this leads into why the race by some was born. No overtakes, consequence of dirty air, and of course the availability of DRS and then being stuck in a DRS train. And some folks being mad at Pirelli, which always gets me. Pirelli ran the experiment of skipping compounds, which we've done before in 2022 Australian and 2018. So we had the C1, C3, C4 as opposed to the C2, C3, C4, hoping that the difference between the C1 and the C3 were big enough. We all saw it was a one-stop race regardless of what compound someone chose, as we saw between Lando Norris and his teammate Oscar Piastri. But how did we get here? Pirelli is what's given known as a target letter. Essentially, targets are what they want from their tires. A wider working range, less overheating, etc. For this year's compounds, the stipulations from everyone that they want the tires to be less sensitive to thermal degradation because the drivers want them to push them harder for longer, which is exactly what's happening because that's what they asked for, so Pirelli provided. In addition to the dirty air problem. As Pirelli is doing their job, it's now apparently their problem to solve it with either trying to skip compounds or do something else. This is a combination of the car and the ask. And the boring processional racing, right? We know it's not just Spa. A lot of people have been complaining that all season or even multiple seasons at this point. I think only Miami, Jeddah, and Silverstone were races won by someone not leading after lap 1. 2 of those was because of a penalty. Multiple things could be true at once. Perhaps there was an intense risk aversion, but other than that, moving on to the rest of the race, let's talk about McLaren. Piastri had an incredible race. I do think 9 out of 10 times, Piastri is simply the stronger driver of the two. Lando Norris also had issues with his battery power, supposedly, in the first lap. Piastri had a great run on him, and then Norris's 3 mistakes added up to about 4 seconds or more. He had pole position, which became second place, which pretty much sucks. Now let's go to that race article talking about Piastri's vital pass on Lando Norris there. Piastri had a superior run of the source, so he was close to Lando Norris on the run to Eau Rouge. He cleverly and briefly backed off to around 75% throttle, as revealed by data from F1 Tempo, which gave Piastri enough room to be as brave as he could as the cars ascended the hill in damp conditions. Both had big lifts halfway up the hill as they scrambled at 300 kilometers an hour, but Norris got on full throttle again sooner. He needed the confidence lift back to 87%, whereas Piastri, knowing that his run into the Camel Straight could well decide the Grand Prix, he kept his foot pinned to 100%. Piastri's run was mighty. He timed his move to the left of Norris with barely millimeters to spare and blasted by a surprisingly early on the straight. Piastri said, "When I watched the onboard back, it didn't look quite as scary as it felt in the car. I knew I had to be very committed to pull that off," which is where I think Oscar Piastri has that championship mentality that we talk about. I think I'm just talking about having the commitment, the bravery, the balls, the guts to do a move like this in not ideal conditions. And that's where I think Lando Norris kind of lacks there, because he gets in his head about those little mistakes and he's like, oh, I can't do that again, or overthinks it and just doesn't either send it or he sends it incorrectly. I think Piastri hasn't beat on this one. P1, P2 for McLaren. I'm sure Zach Brown is fine, Andrea Stella is fine. I'm just waiting for that continued championship battle. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Ferrari. Ferrari did bring some upgrades for this race that were supposed to complement the upgrades they brought in Austria. And I don't know if they were big enough, but Charles Leclerc said they definitely helped. Charles Leclerc did the hard work in qualifying and then defended against Max Verstappen, which was kind of fun to see. Because of the track drying quickly and he had the setup for it, he was really boosted by that. Charles Leclerc also had a really good and quick pit stop. Verstappen lost time in his pit stop, and it gave Leclerc a pretty good cushion to finish where he started. I think Charles Leclerc maximized what he was going to get out of the third best car on this race weekend. And then, of course, there's Lewis Hamilton, which showed why he's a wet weather specialist, not Lance Stroll. I'm not falling for that propaganda. And he even said it was a weekend to forget, but he made up 11 places and got in the points during the Grand Prix. I think he knows that's his baseline. Not even his baseline. I think he just expects more from himself, which I understand and I respect. To start from the pit link has a power unit and setup changes where he agrees that they got the settings better and the setup better because he said he was gaining confidence bit by bit as he was flying through the field. Supposedly FP1 in the qualifyings, he had new brakes, which said caught him out. He's hungry to get a World Driver Championship win. I guess next we can talk about Red Bull. I feel like the weekend was pretty calm for the first time without Christian. Of course, there are no printouts or hot little quips, but I think Laura did fine, did well. Unfortunately for Yuki, he was doing decently well till he got called in too late for his pit stop. I think Red Bull was hesitating on doing a double stack, so he had to stay out a little extra on his inters, therefore losing time, straight line speed, and kind of just stuck in the midfield. He's been pointless for up to 6 rounds now, so hopefully we can just shake it off. And next week, hopefully in the points, top 10 would be great. Oh my god, I almost forgot to talk about Max Verstappen. The sprint qualifying in the Verstappen was crushing it. Couldn't replicate that for the setup he was running was designed for a rain or wet race, not a dry. Started 4th, ended 4th. He had a race. There's just nothing exciting to talk about there. Rookie-wise, I think Bortoletto had his best race weekend. His pace and tire management was actually better than Nico Hülkenberg. The Sauber had decent pace. He did something to that car. Decent execution, raced cleanly. Hadjar had a combination of stopping late, power unit issues, and a second stop, which just caused him a whole bunch of... He started 8th and finished 20th. It was just... I feel so bad. Hadjar just cannot get a good rain race this year. Ollie Behrman was okay, but he matched the pace of Esteban Ocon. I think he could have gotten at least a point for the race, but he had a loss of power after his pit stops, and I'm not sure what's really going on there with the Haas. A lot of people are saying Kimi Antonelli is struggling for confidence. He started P19 in the pits. He ended up P16. Again, the development of the Mercedes going back. Hopefully he can bounce back next week or again after summer shutdown. We'll see if Mercedes can fix whatever's going on there. Otherwise, and reported by the which is Jos Verstappen's favorite news outlet, that Max Verstappen is staying with Red Bull amidst all of the clickbait about him going to Mercedes and all the discussions. But see you for the Hungarian Grand Prix review next Tuesday.